Hi guys, and welcome to Church Online. My name is Ashley and I am the Communications Apprentice here at South Hills, and we are so excited that you are tuning in today as we wrap up our Family Month series. If you are brand new with us, we'd love to invite you to fill out a Connect card. The best way to do that is to text the word CONNECT to 951-476-2550. A Connect card is a great way to get more information all about everything happening here at South Hills, to let us know a little bit about you and your story, how we can be praying for you, or find out more information about speaking to a pastor, taking a next step, or even joining a growth group or serving team. There is some exciting stuff coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Coming up next week, we are actually kicking off a brand new series called The Separation of Church and Hate. And I know what you're thinking. No one wants to talk about politics anymore. I get it. I'm in the same boat. But we did want to take some time and actually address a lot of the stuff going on in our culture right now, in our society, and in our own hearts. We'd love to encourage you guys to check it out, to stick with us. It's just a 2-week series, but I think you're going to get so much out of it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Enjoy the service.
I was buried beneath our shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my turn till I met you. I was breathing but not all my failures have tried too hard. It was my turn till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. The darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your freedom is all that I know. The only new Jesus, when I made you, oh, what a day! You hold my name and I ran out of that grave. The darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. This is the story that's available to all of us this morning. Would you declare it with us? I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, the chains breaking, the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I wasn't orphan, and you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healer. That I'm breathing, I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Hey South Hills, you may or may not know it, but this month is Pastor Appreciation Month. This is an important holiday, well, we're calling it a holiday, that we take time to celebrate every single year. You see, working in full-time ministry is an incredible calling. Pastors get a front row seat to see lives be changed, families reconciled, and communities transformed by the local church. But it's also incredibly challenging. Forbes actually ranked the job of a local pastor as one of the top 5 hardest leadership positions you can hold in the United States. When surveyed, nationally, many pastors reported feeling lonely, burnout, isolated, depressed, and even bogged down beneath unrealistic expectations. Their roles transcend far beyond what you just see on Sunday. Being a pastor is a 24/7 job that demands so much of them emotionally, mentally, and even physically. They are constantly making sacrifices with their time, their energy, to build a church that supports you, the people sitting next to you, and the surrounding community. So here at South Hills, one of our core values is supporting the health and well-being of our staff. We want our pastors to know that they are loved, valued, appreciated for all they do, day in and day out. So I want to ask you to take some time this month and appreciate your pastor. Let them know that they are seen and that they are valued. This can look like a handwritten note, a positive email, a gift card to a restaurant, or even a high five and a sincere thank you on your way out next week. So I will say this, it is not easy finding pastors who could be pastors here at South Hills Church. We have a very high standard for pastors. We look for pastors who can speak, who can lead, who can cast vision, who can relate to people on a day-to-day basis, and that's really hard to come by. So I want to thank you in advance for partnering with me in appreciating pastors this month. I can't wait to see what awesome things you guys come up with. We'll see you soon.
Hey everybody, it is Adam. Thank you so much for joining us for Church Online. One of the things that we do as a part of this long-standing tradition in Family Month is we like to not just focus on our individual families, but we like to give you a little bit of perspective at the fact that we are a family of churches, that we're not just one campus, but in fact, we have multiple campuses all across California, the United States, and even worldwide. And one of the things we do to kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse of that is to do something we call the campus pastor swap. And that means that we actually move all of our different campus pastors around to different campuses on the final week of Family Month so that you can hear from a different one of our pastors from a different one of our locations. And so I'm actually away this weekend speaking at our South County campus, and I'm actually probably at this very moment standing on the edge of a dock in front of a bunch of boats preaching. I'm suffering, I'm doing it for the greater good, okay? But for you today, we have a guest speaker from our Burbank campus. His name is Dave Stewart, and Dave isn't just somebody who is a pastor at our church, but he's been one of my good friends for a really long time. We met each other way back in the day when both of us were in college. So it is really my privilege today to get to introduce to you Dave. And I just want you to lean in today, to listen, to take some notes. Dave isn't just a great pastor and a great communicator. He's a great dad. He's got 4 kids and he has done such a phenomenal job. And so when he talks about parenting, I sit up and listen because he's somebody who practices what he preaches. And so today, would you lean in and take some notes and maybe even consider giving him a shout out on social media for week 4 here, Dave Stewart.
My name is Dave Stewart. I am the campus pastor here in Burbank, and I am so excited to continue our conversation. So I want to encourage you to grab a notepad, grab a Bible or a Bible app, lean into the conversation today. And I think there's some really incredible stuff that you are going to learn and you're going to be able to pull out of our conversation together today. So make sure to lean in and let's get ready to dive into Family Month. I want you to think of a time, and I think we probably all have our own unique moments where this has happened for us, but try to think of a time in your life where you were doing something that you thought was fine, and maybe you were participating in an activity, maybe you were doing something else in the workplace or with a family member, and maybe somebody that you respect. Maybe it was a parental figure or a mentor in your life or a teacher or maybe even a pastor. And that person found out or saw what you were doing and they kind of pulled you aside and had a conversation with you. And although in the moment it felt hurtful almost, they were kind of correcting you. After the fact, you realize that they did that with such love and such grace towards you, and it changed something in you. Maybe you actually, that was like your turning point moment. For many of us, we've had those kinds of experiences. I had one in college. Okay, I went to Bible college and I was working or actually volunteering at a local church. It was a great church that in that location, at that church, at that time, it really helped open up my eyes to just what God was doing and how to work with students. And it really gave me this incredible heart for junior high kids, which is where I began ministry 20 plus years ago. But at this particular church, I was a volunteer. I was working with high school and junior high age kids as just a person that was there volunteering their time. And there was one weekend where I remember hanging out with a bunch of students. And myself and a couple other leaders were hanging out with all these students. And students kind of wanted to do something that night. And this was in Springfield, Missouri, so there's not a whole lot to do in the first place. And one of the things they wanted to do was go and prank a bunch of other students. And I'm all for pranks as long as nothing's getting damaged and nobody's getting hurt or anything like that. And they were all harmless pranks. And so myself and a couple leaders, we let these kids jump in our cars and we kind of drove them around and we hit all these different houses and all this stuff. And so one of the things that they did with their pranks, way back in the day, when toilet paper wasn't quite as valuable as it is today, you would actually take toilet paper and we would wrap everything in it. So we were wrapping people's cars, we were throwing it over the trees, we were doing all kinds of stuff, TPing people's houses and all this other stuff. So we had a great time, honestly. It was super fun, and students and us, we bonded, and it was really, really fun, actually. And I'll never forget the next weekend when we had our student service. The youth pastor at the time pulled me in and we sat down and I had no idea what he wanted to talk about, but he just said, "Hey man, I heard about some things that happened last weekend and I just want to talk to you about them." And I thought like, oh man, am I getting in trouble here? And I wasn't getting in trouble, but he started to help explain to me the difference between being a leader and being a friend. And I will never forget that conversation. I'll never forget where we were sitting when we had the conversation. I'll never forget the person who invested in me and cared about me enough to say something to me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. I didn't see the problem with it. I didn't see the danger in it. I thought it was harmless fun. But he really helped me understand the difference that if I was going to become a pastor, if I was going to become a youth pastor, I could still be people's friends, but I had to learn where to draw the line between just being a buddy and being their leader. And there's a difference in those two things. At the time, I didn't see it. I didn't know the difference between it all. I just thought, well, we're just going to be relational and we're going to lead everybody and we're going to be best friends all the time. But that wasn't the case. And after a little while in his office, I understood what he was saying, and he did it in such an incredible way that I walked out of the office thanking him for basically telling me like to stop doing what I was doing. Like I really appreciated the way he went about it. Now, I think we've all had moments in life where somebody called us out on something that we in the moment didn't see as a problem. And maybe after the fact, and maybe through the way in which they said it, we realized what was happening. And we realized what we were doing and how we should have maybe handled some things differently. And I don't know about you, but that one just stuck to me. That conversation when I was 20, 21 years old stuck to me so well. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the lesson that I learned in that moment. And many of us, we're responsible for different things, and you are responsible for who you are and what you become. You're responsible for how you turned out. But maybe along the way, there's been other people that have invested in you. And through those other people, their investments back into you have really helped shape who you've become. They've helped shape who you've turned into. They've shaped kind of the person that you are. Now, here's something I think is really important to ask ourselves. What was it about that person? Think back to that person in your life. What was it about that person that made you respect them so much? What was it about that person that made you respect them? What gave their opinion so much authority in your life? Because maybe you really never gave anybody that much authority in your life, but that one person in that one moment, what they said to you stuck, and it did something in you because you gave it a different level of authority in your life. Or maybe why did you feel the need to take action when they said something? Now, I know for me in my situation, the reason why I gave this person so much authority, the reason why I respected them so much is because they walked the talk all the time. I mean, they were the same person that I saw on stage speaking as they were in the back parking lot of the church hanging out afterwards. They were the same person at somebody's house for a party as they were on the stage in the main service when they were speaking and filling in for the main pastor. They were just the same person all the time. And they built and really earned a level of respect from me. And as I watched them kind of live their life out in front of everyone, I gave that person authority. I gave them the ability to speak into my life. And because there's plenty of other times in our lives where people don't think the right thing about you, maybe they don't say the right thing to you, maybe the way that they confronted you or corrected you, they went about it in the wrong way. Maybe it just turned into an eye roll, maybe you just blew it off, whatever it was. But that moment with that person, something was different. So here's the question. Why are some mentors more effective than others? Why are some people who speak into other people's lives, mentors, why are some simply better at what they do, more effective at what they do than others? And I think this is a really important question to ask. Not just as we look at the people in our lives who influence us, but as we think about our own lives and how we influence other people. I think it's a really important question, especially if you're a parent or if you're in relationships with other people. If you have any kind of quote unquote family around you, if you have deep-rooted relationships with anyone, I think we have to understand, what is it about us that mentors into someone else? What do we want to replicate out of us into someone else? And how do we become effective at that? And if you have kids, you've probably tried to wonder this for yourself. How do I mentor my own kids? How do I parent my kids effectively? And I think it's a constant question that we all are trying to figure out, whether you have children or not. We're all trying to figure this out. How do we have a better effectiveness in mentoring and leading people? But even if you don't have kids, you still have these moments in life where you're trying to decide whether you're supposed to comfort someone, to lean into their moment, or confront them. I mean, think about it. This is what we do all the time in our interactions with people. We either confront them, we challenge them, maybe we get upset with them over something, or we comfort them. We confront them or we comfort them. And I want to get into this here in just a moment. And so I'm going to ask you to lean in with me and just follow along, if you will. I think everybody has an opinion when it comes to how do we confront someone or how do we comfort someone. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing this. Some people would say, you have to be really strict. You have to be really strict. You have to be really demanding. And that's going to cause you to become very confrontational with other people. You need to call them out all the time. When they do something wrong, call them out on it. And don't hesitate either. Don't even look around to see who's in the room. Just call them out in the moment, right away. Some people have that feeling. And then some people just have the thought of like, no, you know what? It's better just to nurture the relationship. Don't confront them, don't call them out, don't challenge them. And if you're going to do it, you got to kind of do it in this very loving, caring kind of way. And really, you shouldn't have to confront them if you care for them, if you comfort them correctly. They need more praise. They need more encouragement. They need more affirmation. They don't need to be confronted ever. See, most of us tend to champion as adults what we feel like we didn't get as kids. Follow with me. Whether you have kids or not, it doesn't matter. We tend to act in the way that we didn't get when we were younger. And this is just clinical. When you and I become adults, we oftentimes treat other people with whatever it was that was missing when we were young. So if you grew up in a very strict household, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, if you grew up in a very strict, confrontational home, you will oftentimes lean to the opposite. And oftentimes you will lean to the far opposite. You'll become very non-confrontational, and you'll be all comfort, all love, all nurture. If you grew up in a very nurturing household where there were really no boundaries and no confrontation and you just kind of did whatever you want, oftentimes those people will swing the pendulum the other direction. They'll become a little bit more confrontational and start to build guidelines and rules around people. But in reality, we know this. You know this is true. You and I need both. Both of those things are necessary. But it's really hard to balance those two things in relational context. It's really hard for us to balance this comfort and confrontation. How do we comfort people and love people, but how do we still confront them and challenge them? See, most of us tend to err on one side or the other, to either be more of a connector or corrector. We either want to connect relationally, love them, nurture them, care for them, or we want to correct them, challenge them, push them, call them out. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Some of it's personal. In other situations, maybe it was more environmental. And oftentimes it's even generational. Previous generations parented with very high correction and low connection. And what tends to happen is the next generation will parent in a way that's inverted. They'll go high connection, low correction. But the best mentor that you and I could ever look at and learn from just happens to be Jesus. So let's take a look at this. If you have a Bible or an app, go to John chapter 1, verse 14. Here's what it says in John 1:14. It says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father," check this out, "full of grace and truth." Speaking about Jesus here, Jesus was full of grace and full of truth, both at the same time. Now, the reason that we need both of these things, the reason why you and I need both correction and connection, we need both grace and truth, is that there are destructive things about all of us that we don't want to see, because most of us, if we're honest, most of us have blind spots. And in those blind spots, we either are unaware or we're unwilling to address those things. Most of us understand that there are some things that we just don't see about ourselves. There's some things we don't see about our parenting or our interaction with friendships or the way we treat our siblings, the way that we speak to authority. Most of us understand that we have some blind spots. But oftentimes we ignore our blind spots, either because we're just completely unwilling to deal with it, or we just lack the self-awareness to see it in ourselves. See, we're likely or unlikely to change unless someone points out what we're missing. I mean, think about it. You and I rarely just come to our own conclusions and begin to change our own lives. Oftentimes, it requires someone that we trust who's willing to speak into us. That's why you can oftentimes sit in a sermon and you'll listen to a pastor speak, you'll listen to a podcast, or you'll read a book, and there's something that's written or something that's said, and it jumps off the page at you, and you realize, oh my goodness, I've never realized this about myself. That's me. I need to change that. And it's because we've allowed ourselves to open that space and let somebody speak into us. And suddenly we become willing and we become aware of it. And we all know this. We all know that we do this. I mean, think about it. You may know that you're not in the best health. You may know that there's some health issues that you're struggling with. There's some eating habits that you have that aren't good. There's some lack of exercise and discipline that's all there. And you know that you should do better. And maybe your spouse has said something. Maybe a parent or a sibling has said something to you. Maybe even a coworker got the nerve together to let you know that they're concerned for your health. And you kind of blow it off all the time. But when you finally go to the doctor and the doctor looks you in the eyes and says, hey, if you don't get this under control, you probably aren't going to see your daughter walk down the aisle one day. When they put it in certain terms, suddenly you hear it. You become aware, and at the same time, you become willing to change. Why? It's because who it was and how they delivered it. It was a person that you respected who spoke to you with grace and truth. See, what I'm confident about, at least for myself, is that I'm more open. I am way more open to being shown what I don't want to see by someone that I'm convinced actually likes and cares for me. And I would bet you are too. See, I'm way more open to hearing something that's difficult for me to hear if I'm convinced that the person who's delivering that news genuinely cares about me. If they actually want what's best for me. And if that person actually wants what's best for me, I'm usually willing to listen. And that's just reality. That's the reality of our humanity, if you think about it. It's just who we are. And so let me show you an example. It's an example of an Old Testament scripture passage. It's an example of an Old Testament person that you may or may not be familiar with. And if you're not totally familiar with this particular story, I'll get you all caught up, so don't worry about it. But it's King David, David from the Old Testament. And there's a series of verses that we'll kind of run through quickly in 2 Samuel chapter 7 and 2 Samuel chapter 12. And so if you will, go ahead and open up a Bible, use your app, go to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 2 through 3. It says this, the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells in a tent." And Nathan says to the king, "Go, do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you." I'm sure we all understand exactly what's going on, right? Probably not. So let me get you kind of caught up to speed. Here's what's happening. David is the king of Israel. David and Goliath, David, amazing leader, best king that Israel's ever had, David, okay? So that's David. And then you have Nathan. Nathan's a prophet. Oftentimes in the Old Testament, prophets were simply a mouthpiece for God. They would come and they would speak God's message to oftentimes the leader of the people, but many times to all of the people as well. So Nathan and David have a really unique relationship. David is trying his hardest to be a man after God's own heart. Nathan is a prophet who is constantly nurturing and loving David, but he speaks very firmly to him all the time. And so David summons this prophet who is really like a spiritual kind of father figure to him in his life because his conscience is telling him that he needs to take action about something. He feels like he should do something. There's something inside of him that's saying, look, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, the presence of God here on the earth is sitting in a tent. And I'm in this amazing place, built with cedar. In other words, it's elaborate. It's amazing where I'm at. But God's presence is sitting in a tent, and that's not right. So he wants to do something about it. So he brings Nathan in. He says, Nathan, this is what I want to do. I want to take some action. And Nathan basically says, look, God picked you for a reason. And you have what it takes to make the right decision, which for David, whose actual dad was less than encouraging to him, was something he really needed to hear from a mentor, from a spiritual leader, a father figure to him. So David hears these amazing words coming from Nathan, and he's ready to dive in because Nathan is someone who he respected and spoke to him with grace and truth. So David respects Nathan because of who he is, his position, because of his authority in his life, because he knows he's a prophet. But there's also a personal relationship between Nathan and David. And so David's way more willing to hear what Nathan says and then act upon the encouragement that he gives. So Nathan has faith in David. Nathan encourages David to go ahead and do what he wants to do. And there's this connection built. This connection built on confidence and care for each other. And isn't this really what we all would want from some type of mentor in our life? Isn't this what we all would want? The sense that they like us, they care about us, they believe in us, they want what's best for us. I mean, that's ultimately what we all would love to have in a person who speaks into our life. We know that they care for us. We know that they actually like us. We know that they believe in us and they want what's best for us. And we know this because of how they speak to us and how they speak about us, how they treat us. Because deep down, every one of us crave connection. We all do. We crave a deeper connection with people, especially the people that we're going to open up our lives to speak into us. And although it's what we all want, it's not all that we need. See, the only thing that we need is not just this connection. It's foundational. It comes first in relationships. We should all value connection in our relationships because connection should always come first. But that's not all that we need. And I want to show this to you in the life of David. So David has incredible connection with this prophet named Nathan. And although David was a great king, he wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He did some things that he shouldn't have done. He had an affair with a woman. He got her pregnant. He actually had her husband sent to the front lines and killed. And for the most part, he managed to keep it all covered up. But Nathan, like any good mentor, like any good parent, like any good prophet, could sense something was off. God actually gives Nathan some insight into what's going on. And Nathan gets this feeling that he's going to have to confront David. Now, keep in mind, he's already built connection through relationship. And so now there's kind of an open door that he can actually confront him. And so look at this in 2 Samuel. It's a little bit longer passage, but I'll just go ahead and read it for us. 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. It says, "And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said, 'There were two men in a certain city, and one was rich and the other was poor. The rich man had many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb,'" in other words, a baby lamb, "which he had bought. And he brought it up, and he grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his morsels and drink from his cup and lie in his arms." In other words, this little tiny lamb had become almost like family to him, right? This is like not just a sheep, it's like a family pet. And it was like a daughter to him. "And there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guests who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David gets angry. He hears this story, and he can't believe that anyone would do this, that anyone would treat a poor man and take away his prized possession, even though he had a lot of his own sheep. And so verse 5, "Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, 'As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity.'" And so David's enraged in this moment because this man had done something so terrible. And then look at verse 7. Because of the relationship that Nathan had with David, Nathan says to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you out of the hand of Saul." This is the confrontation moment. Nathan was telling a story, really a metaphor, almost like a parable, to kind of paint a picture that would make sense to David. David was king. David had everything that he could ever want. But he saw somebody else's wife, and he had to have that person's wife. Even though David could have had any other wife that he wanted, he had plenty of wives of his own. But he did something so terrible And then he tried to cover it up. He tried to hide it. So Nathan has to have this confrontation moment with David. Now, you could imagine that it's a little nerve-wracking, I'm sure, if you're Nathan and you're having this conversation with the king of Israel. But Nathan sets it up in just the right way. And David sees this person's behavior and can't believe it. And then Nathan drops the bomb, right? He drops the hammer on him and says, "You are that man." I mean, this is confrontation. It's the moment that every good parent, that every good friend, that every good mentor will have at some point in their life. We all have a moment with someone else where we have an opportunity to see what's really going on and to say something. Maybe you recognize a destructive pattern in a friend's life, somebody that you know, and you see some things that they're doing in their life, and you know where this pattern is going. You see the path that they're on, and you see exactly what's getting ready to happen in their own life, or maybe to their marriage. And you see it because you've been there. But oftentimes we come to a point where we're challenged. Do we say something? Do we have the confrontation moment? Or do we not? And this is the exact moment. And Nathan does it out of pure love for David. Again, it's grace and it's truth. But let's continue with this story. Look ahead. In 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 13, it says, David says to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David, "The Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die." What's happening here? David basically confesses everything. He apologizes to Nathan. He apologizes to God. He understands what's happened. He's willing to turn, and his heart is turning directly back to God. Why? Because of who it was and how Nathan did it. It was who Nathan was. He was a person that David respected, and how he did it was in such a grace-filled way that Nathan wasn't some random critic of David. It wasn't just some guy that was trying to get back at him. David knew that Nathan really loved him. And so when he confronted him, he understood why he was doing it. So Nathan was a close mentor, had deep connection, somebody who liked him, somebody who cared about him, somebody who wanted what was best for David. And yes, David confesses and he apologizes. But here's where you have to understand. You have to see this bigger picture here. David still suffers. David still suffers from the sin that he committed. And here lies just an incredible truth. This is just a reality that you and I have to hold on to. No matter how long you have followed Jesus, or if you're just starting out, if you're just trying to figure out what this whole Jesus thing is about, that just because we're forgiven of our sin, doesn't mean that we won't still have to suffer the real world consequences of our sin. See, there's still consequences oftentimes that come back to us when we do something that we shouldn't have done. When we make that decision, when we go down the destructive path, oftentimes there are still consequences that we have to deal with. We still have to fix some things. We still have to correct some patterns in our life that we should never have formed in the first place. And for David, life actually gets much worse before it gets better. The secret gets out. People start to find out what David really did. And so David has to do some things that he probably didn't want to do as a king. David has to grieve publicly. And he and his new wife, they actually lose the baby. He takes this wife that he got pregnant as his wife, and they have the baby coming along, but they lose the baby. And they're devastated by it. And I'm not sure what I would have done in this situation, experiencing the kind of loss and pain that David did. But David manages to make changes to his life and do what's right moving forward. He never once gets to a place where he just blames God for everything. He understands that he had a part to play in some of the negative consequences that have come back to him. But he chooses. I think it's so important. He makes a conscious choice to move in the right direction. But to me, that's not even the best part of the story. Just the fact that he continues to move in the right direction is awesome, but that's not the best part of the story. The best part is what happens after that. If you fast forward to verses 24 and 25, look at this. It says, then David comforted his wife Bathsheba and went in to her and lay with her, and she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him and sent a message by Nathan the prophet. So he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. See, when David's life begins to bounce back, who's the first person he wants to pull back into his life? Nathan, the guy who confronted him, the guy who called him out on his sin, the guy who exposed his sin and really caused him a series of extremely painful experiences moving forward. But when David has his next son, the first person he wants there is Nathan, the guy who confronted him, the guy who challenged him, the guy who called him out. And I think it's so incredible when we just stop and we understand what's happening in this story. See, he partially credits his mentor for the good that he's now experiencing in his life. And I think this is ultimately what we want from the relationships that we have. That when you call somebody out and you confront them in the right way, and it's done through relationship, and it's done in grace and in truth, ultimately the hope is that it'll build your relationship and make it stronger. At least this is what I hope for as a dad. I have 4 kids, and it's what I hope for with my children, that when I confront them on some issues, when I'm kind of hard on them in certain moments, that they understand why I'm hard on them. They understand why I'm being a little tough or why I'm calling them out on something. And it's only to make them better. It's only to help them grow. And the hope is, probably not right away, the hope is that somewhere down the road, they circle back and they understand. They understand the why. And I think that's what we all want. And it's not just David. It's not just Nathan. It wasn't just Jesus. It was also Paul. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament writes this letter to a church. The church is Thessalonica. And it's found in 1 Thessalonians. So as we close, I want to read this to you, because I think this is so incredible to understand. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, here's what it says. It says, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. It's almost like what the Apostle Paul is saying here is that we loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, not only the message of Jesus, but we actually shared with you our own lives. In other words, it's like saying, I'm committing to not just share with you what I know, which is correction, but who I am. That's connection. That's relationship. It's what the Apostle Paul modeled, because the Apostle Paul was modeling what he saw Jesus model, and what he witnessed through the disciples of Jesus. It's this idea that we build connection with people, and then at some point we can commit to the correction, but only through the connection. Because the combination of these two, that is what we use to help shape the lives of someone else. That's what God uses to shape our lives, because we need both. You need both. I need both of those. And we need to live out both for the people around us. So let me ask, what if you and I decided to follow in the footsteps of Jesus? What if you and I decided that we were going to live out and model these footsteps of Jesus and actually commit to giving those following us correction and connection? That we would only give correction when we've taken the time to build the connection relationally with them. And what if we decided to live in this place of grace and truth with the people around us? If you're a parent, there's no better way for you to parent your children than through grace and truth. It's not all grace or all truth. It's not all connection or all correction. There's a model and there's a balance, and Jesus teaches us this. It is an equal amount of both. And I think if we parented this way, if we developed friendships this way, we could become people that others would look up to and others would respect to speak into their lives. Can you imagine what your life could look like? I mean, could you imagine what your church could look like? Could you imagine what your family could look like if you did this? I mean, if you acted in this way. I think the question you would have to answer for yourself would simply be, which side? Which side of this equation do the people around you need more from you? Which side of this equation do the people around you, your family, need more from you? Do they need more grace or do they need more truth? Do they need more connection or do they need more correction? And you are the only person that can answer that question. So let me wrap up and encourage you. I want to encourage you to respond in whatever way makes sense for you today. Maybe it's a commitment to parent your children through connection and correction equally. Maybe it's just a commitment to develop a mentorship relationship with someone in your life, and maybe allow someone else to speak into you and develop a relationship with someone else so that you can begin speaking into their life. But those relationships have to be built through connection first. And maybe it's simply not being afraid to speak grace and truth to those around you. Oftentimes we hide. We don't like to speak truth and we don't like to be honest and upfront. But what if you did it in a way that was full of grace, yet still full of truth? See, I think someone in your life right now needs you. They need you to step up. They need you to have a balance of the two. So the real question is, will you? Will you do that for them? And maybe you hear all of this and you realize that you would love to begin to live like Jesus. You would love to understand what a relationship with Jesus is really all about, but you just simply don't know how. Maybe you've been around church for a little bit. Maybe you've even attended South Hills for a couple weeks or a couple months or even a couple years. Maybe you've been watching online, but you've never taken the time to develop a personal relationship with Jesus. You've never taken that next step to make everything become more personal. Well, I want to encourage you today. Would you today simply take the time to say yes to Jesus? That's what we call it around here, is just saying yes to Jesus. And just understand this, there's no magic prayer. There's no specific set of words that you have to say. The pattern that we see is simply invite Jesus into your life. Accept him as who he is. Believe that he really died on a cross and resurrected and he did it all for you. And then commit yourself. Commit yourself to doing your best to live like Jesus the best that you can, understanding that you're not perfect and you'll make mistakes and you'll fail. But that's why you have this church family around you, is to be a community of people who will encourage you and speak into you. And so that's the beautiful part of all of it, that when you come into a faith and understanding of who Jesus is, when you say yes to Jesus, you don't have to do this alone. See, this is why South Hills exists, to help people who are far from God find a life-changing relationship with Jesus. So I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to take that next step. And so if you're watching online on YouTube or Facebook, if you're listening on a podcast, when you get to a place where you can, would you simply text us so that we as a church can come alongside of you and help you in this incredible decision that you're making today. So can we pray together? And we'll wrap up. So Jesus, thank you today for the reminder of our values and that our values are formed through relational connection. Would you help us to build strong relationships with those who are around us, and at the same time be willing to speak with grace and truth, while also being willing to listen to someone else that needs to speak honestly to us. I pray that we would strive to grow and become better and stronger in all of our relationships. And for those who are saying yes to you today, I pray that you would just confirm in their hearts the decision that they're making right now. Would you help them? Would you give them the strength to go all in and begin living for you? And I pray that they would discover their God-given purpose and potential while also allowing this church community to help them grow and understand you. And so, Jesus, we thank you for today. And we pray for your absolute blessing on all of your people. And it's in your name we can pray it. Amen. I want to thank you so much for just being with us today, for watching or listening, wherever you are. You know that as a church, we talk a lot about generosity. We talk a lot about the purpose that we give back and the reason why we give to God through our tithes and our offerings. We talk about it all the time. And oftentimes when we speak of it, we speak about how we give through the local church and not to the local church. You're not giving to the local church just so we can build up some big bank account, but you give through the local church so that we can be a blessing to the community around us, the area that God has trusted us to be in. And it's because of you that we can do all the things that we do as a church. But today I want to remind you of something a little bit different. We also give because we're part of something so much bigger than any one of us. You see, we each have a role. Every single one of us has a part to play in what we're doing. And each of our roles are not equal. Each of our parts that we play aren't equal to everyone else's part. See, some can simply do more, and some can give more than others. And it doesn't mean that somebody who does more or somebody who gives more is somehow more spiritual, more holy, or more blessed. It's just them doing their part. And so what I want to encourage you with today is to never compare what you do to what somebody else does. Never compare how much you serve or how much you give to what somebody else does. We don't give to compare ourselves to someone else. We give out of an expression of our heart. And so we have to listen to what God is speaking to us. We have to give in the way that God is directing us. And we have to know that we're doing our part to further God's kingdom and not our own. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for trusting God through your financial generosity. And so no matter what way you give, whether it's online or through texting to give, whether it's through our brand new app or whether it's through the mail or you drop it off in the mailbox at the church, we are so grateful that we get to do this together. We get to do this as a family. And so God bless you and your family this week. Make sure to get into the devotional. Make sure to check out all the Family Month stuff. Find a South Hills group and commit to it. But this week, stay connected and stay safe. God bless you.
Today was our opening day for our South Hills, Idaho campus, and it was an amazing, amazing day. The team here worked so hard. What an incredible day of people saying yes to Jesus, all kinds of fun, all kinds of laughter and memories and families coming, getting connected here. But we just want to say thank you because of your sacrifice and your support and your generosity and you guys praying for us. You made this possible, and so we get to stand on your shoulders. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a part of South Hills and helping us create a place here in Idaho in the Treasure Valley, the perfect place for imperfect people. The message of Jesus is simple, and so that's why we exist, to help people who are far away from God get connected and experience His love. And so thank you so much. Thanks for being a part of today, and it was a great day, so thanks again.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm helping with worship leadership here at South Hills, Idaho. We're super excited to kind of get this kicked off, and honestly it's been really cool to see the body of Christ and the church family. Everybody is like working to volunteer, coming to set up and tear down. Everyone's like all in, so I'm really excited for what this holds.
We're super excited for the launch, man.
Yeah.
We've been working on this for months and it's finally here. We're so excited to launch South Hills in Idaho.
Yeah, we've been going for multiple years to the Southern California campus, and it's just made our lives better in every possible way. And so we're happy to bring that up to the Eagle area.
Today was our grand opening here at South Hills Church, and we absolutely loved it.
Awesome, we had a great time, great opening, great people showing up. It was just fun seeing all the new faces and getting to hear the word that Randy had for us.
Come on back to the South Hills, Idaho.
Hey South Hills, grand opening Sunday to our South Hills, Idaho campus. I cannot believe it. It has been over a year that we started praying, prepping, and planning for this campus. I heard so many great stories of people who were invited by some of our core members, people who received our invite inside their mail from one of our flyers, people who just heard about the buzz happening in the community. But at the end of the day, God made this happen. We were so excited to see the turnout of people who are coming together to worship God together here in Eagle, Idaho. It is going to be such a great campus, such a great experience, and it's all happening because of you, because of our faithful South Hills members who have been committed to God, committed to South Hills, committed to the vision of expanding and growing and making sure that we as a church are giving towards life change. That when we give, we know that we're giving towards bigger things than us. You continue to expand the vision of South Hills, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope that you learned something, that you were encouraged, and that you laughed along with us today. I'd like to remind you guys to fill out a Connect card, especially if you're new with us. We'd love to get to know you and hear about your story, and you can do that by texting the word CONNECT to 951-476-2550. Or you can grab the link for that down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. We love you, and we'll see you back here next week as we begin a brand new series.